Missed you. Missed you, YouTube. So great to be back. See, this is why I can never stop. It's so bright. I hate that you can't control the exposure. It looks so bright. It's fine. Oh my god, I'm like glowing. This is too much. Boop. We'll hope it just naturally. Maybe if I turn. Is that better? Yeah, we'll go with better on that. Hope everyone's having a great Monday morning. Gonna get started real quick. Give a couple minutes for people to join. Get everything set up. Make sure I can see you guys, see your comments. What's up, Jack? What's up, Maui? Going live for the podcast. Yeah, I'm right. I can never stop doing this show. Never. I love hearing from you guys. Maui, are you a real dog or is that your dog in the photo? If so, what is your dog's name? Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Today, we finally talk that Grace closing story where I give my unique perspective as a member of that opening team. The super sad news on Paul Bocuse, David Chang news ×2 in this episode, Flynn McGarry also news ×2, and a big time magazine's closing story all the way down. Well, not closing all the way down, but returning from its pinnacle moment, plus a few extra stories coming up. Welcome back to the show, folks. My name is Justin Khanna. This is episode 48 of The Emulsion, a show where I talk all about the news stories and industry happenings that matter to me as I navigate my career as a professional chef. Hey, have you guys seen Iron Man, the first one, where he gets to the question about the Playboy models? That is this week's show. Last week, I didn't record an episode. I was on holiday. It is the first calendar week that I've missed in the history of this show. But there's 2 episodes this week, so that's where that joke comes in. But I will be traveling to Atlanta this weekend, and I'm going to sit down with Dosfi for the follow-up to that episode. So right off the bat here, if you have questions about creativity or food as art or aesthetics or eating out, I would love for you to comment those down below or tweet at me or hit me up on Instagram or even Dosfi on Instagram. I will be sure to ask him those questions for you guys. Thank you so much for joining in. We're going to get right into it into a second, but first, shout out to everyone on Patreon supporting this show and me and what I create here on the interwebs. You guys are the bomb. If you're interested in giving me some of your hard-earned money in return for all this free content I put out for you folks, I have it set up to start as little as $1 per month. I'm more or less interested in taking Patreon into the kind of donation spectrum for support. Going forward, especially when I'm kind of a one-man show like I am right now. I teased it a little bit in episode 46, but, you know, like juggling both, all the content that I put out for free and then kind of making Patreon this like paid platform for you guys, I'm feeling like prioritizing certain people, and that doesn't really make me feel the best, just because you either can or can't afford or do or don't want to pay for what I put out on that platform. So I want all my content to be free, and if you want to help me do cooler projects, bring on more people, increase production quality, get better access to gear or people, then you can do that. That's what Patreon should be for, and that's what I want to kind of transition that into for you guys. Only pay if you can or don't if you can't, and that kind of model makes sure I can keep my speed up, right? Like I feel like I was constantly worrying about either releasing videos early or doing like certain videos just for the Patreon people. I'm still going to keep live streams a thing. We have to do it for January, so if you guys want a private Q&A with me on that platform, I will be doing that next week. So if you guys do want to support and have kind of a ask me anything, that is what's going to happen on that platform. Anyways, enough with the Patreon stuff. Today's beverage, I actually picked this up. I was inspired by my girlfriend's purchase the other week. The LaCroix Curate. This one is melon and pomelo. Actually, they're I think it is in Spanish, and they're actually calling it cantaloupe pink grapefruit sparkling water. It's a little bit too soon in the morning for me to have my second cup of coffee. I'm probably going to have it after I put this up. But insanely refreshing, not any sugar, kind of like curbs my any soda cravings I want to have. I'm a big fan. Not sponsored by LaCroix. I wish we were, but we're not. So the first story today, the one that I'm most guilty actually about not covering yet on the show, because it's almost a month old. Grace, Curtis Duffy's 3-star restaurant in Chicago, has permanently closed. And the biggest reason that I didn't cover this story right away, one, I had 2 interview shows to do, so that was kind of like, in no way, shape, or form did this story fit into either of those 2 shows. But 2, I actually had plans to make a specific standalone video all about my entire experience with that restaurant, and because of how things worked, I wasn't actually legally sure I could talk about it, like my experience there. But with all the problems that they have going on right now, I feel like me being one dude that talks about it isn't going to cause that much panic or stress. And I'm also pretty sure what I'm going to talk about isn't really going to delve into any legal issues. But anyways, yes, I was on the opening team of Grace. And for everyone that hasn't seen in the past month, it closed. What ended up happening was Michael Muser, who is the general manager of Grace, he runs the front of the house department, left on, or got fired, depending on who you talk to, on December 1st. And then Curtis Duffy, who is the chef, the main source of that restaurant, also stopped showing up to work. And then after that, all of the staff followed. So there was no kitchen staff, there was no general manager, there was no head chef. The restaurant was forced to close. And that was the story. That is exactly what happened. But anyways, I was on the opening team of that restaurant back in 2012, so I do feel particularly qualified to talk about this. So I want to tell you guys exactly what happened, my experience with the restaurant coming, especially as me being part of the opening team, exactly what happened. And then that will hopefully give you some context, which will make sense once we start to talk about the kind of he said, she said that's currently happening with the story. So it's 2012. I needed my first job out of culinary school. The only experience I had was at Per Se. I had my culinary school experience. I went to the Culinary Institute of America. I did my 6-month externship at Per Se, and I had done a bunch of different stages around New York City. But the problem with that was I didn't have any quote-unquote line cook experience. So they were pretty hesitant to hire me. I sat down for my interview. I got their connection from this guy. I mean, you guys all know probably Greg Backstrom now. He was at Atera in New York. And I did a stage there because I wanted to work there. I really wanted to go back to Per Se. That was my big goal. And so I got in touch with Greg. He was like, you should go check out this guy, Curtis Duffy. He's opening this spot, and it's going to be huge in Chicago. I was like, okay. I'm really interested in fine dining. I really want to explore what it's like. I actually wanted a restaurant in Chicago for a long time. I'm from Wisconsin. I wanted to be in the Midwest, closer to my family. And so it was the perfect storm. It was the opportunity to be part of an opening team at a place that was shooting for 3 stars with a guy who had worked under Grant Achatz. It was going to be the perfect restaurant for me. So I sat down, and they were really concerned that I didn't have enough restaurant line cook experience. And that was really hard for me to take. I wasn't really sure what to say to them. So what had happened was I looked on Eater, much how I researched the stories for this show, and I saw that Curtis was going to be doing an interview with Michael Muser at a bar, some random bar in Chicago, all talking about the opening of Grace. So I was 19 years old. I went up to the door, and I told them, hey, listen, I'm not going to buy a drink. I just need to be in this bar for this interview with this chef. They're like, okay, you can't buy any alcoholic drinks. You have to sit at this very specific seat in the bar. We can't let you go out and do any shots with anybody, but we'll let you in. So I got in. I sat through his entire presentation, and I came up to him at the end of the talk, and I said, listen, I know that I can't exactly show you or stage with you because the restaurant isn't open yet, but I really am interested in what you're doing, and I'd be sincerely appreciative for the opportunity to work with you. And he was just so impressed that the day that I interviewed, I also showed up to an event that he did. He gave me the job on the spot. He shook my hand and said, welcome to Grace. And that was exactly how it happened. And I remember I'm literally getting goosebumps talking about it because it was a really, really proud moment for me. And all the scenes that you see in the For Grace documentary, all of the, like, where there's only like maybe 3 or 4 people in the kitchen, I was there. That was the two sous chefs, the 3 sous chefs, and the pastry chef and Curtis would take over restaurant spaces at like 5 in the morning before they were open to test dishes, to get media hype, to work on this documentary that they're doing. And I told them that I wanted to come, that I wanted to be there. And I was the only cook, the only one on staff that wasn't in management that was there at those meetings. Because I was young and I was hungry and I wanted it. So it opened. They were. It was a little bit late. We were all getting paid pretty much minimum wage, which was unfortunate, but that's how it was. And so we worked really long hours. And after probably 2 or 3 weeks of being open, we all started to look at our paychecks and we were like, we're not getting paid overtime. And that was really frustrating because he had that whole lawsuit with Charlie Trotter, Curtis did. And to see that he wasn't paying his staff any overtime was really, really frustrating. And so that was really hard for a lot of the staff, especially the guys who took a pay cut to take the job at Grace. There was maybe 13 of us cooks in the kitchen, and it was really hard coming from all over the place with all different pedigrees and Michelin stars on our resumes to not get paid overtime. And so what ended up happening, and this is where the legality part comes, is, and that's why I'm pretty sure I can talk about it, is because we all agreed to take back wages instead of suing, basically, for them not paying us overtime. And so that's what happened. They all gave us back wages, which I'm almost positive was not enough what we were supposed to be getting paid, but that's what happened. We all agreed to kind of like stop and not talk about it and just continue to move on. So that's what happened. We continued. We were not maxing out every single night, which was also super frustrating. We would cap it at maybe like 35 people every night, and we could probably max out at like 70. So that was really frustrating for me, and it didn't really make sense as a young culinarian to be in a restaurant where they couldn't afford to pay us, but they weren't maximizing revenue. That was really hard for me to take. And also it was really hard because Curtis wasn't there as often as I wanted. It was just not my dream. It was just not exactly what I envisioned in my head. I had this fantasy of like learning under Curtis Duffy and him teaching me all the time and it being this this platform for creativity. They had a basement underneath the restaurant where they all promised us there was going to be cookbooks and laptops where we could come in and do a bunch of creative stuff and brainstorm new dishes. And what that basement ended up turning into was like the beer pong room and the place where we would just sit and watch movies and everyone would get drunk after service on Saturday night. It didn't turn out to be the restaurant that I wanted it to be. So I gave my 2-week notice. I went to Curtis and I said, listen, I'm interested in moving on. I had already accepted a position at the French Laundry, which was secure. And I didn't tell him that. I just told him that I was interested in leaving. And what he had told me was that I should be ashamed. I worked for him for 8 months. I put in almost a month and a half of like tearing down the roof of the basement and painting the walls just to get work, just to get hours. And he told me that I should be ashamed for not working for him for a year. And that was also really hard for me because it was someone that I did look up to and someone that I did want mentorship from. And they did not treat me well the last 2 weeks that I was there. It was not fun to be at that restaurant for the last 2 weeks. A lot of people walked out. A lot of people just stopped showing up to work. A lot of people just didn't give him any respect when they left. And so I felt like it was the right thing to do to give my 2 weeks. 3 people had left before I left. There's a lot of drama that happened with that restaurant. And that's what happens when there's ego and all this money and all this ambition going for these big things to happen. And I want all of this to be said not to share a sob story, because it's not really a sob story. I learned a lot, and it was something that I needed to happen in my career. But that's exactly... I need to preface this story with all of this stuff, because all of it makes sense as we go forward. So fast forward now to December 21st, and the news drops that Grace closed. And so what gives? What happened? Well, there was a bunch of news that came out around the story even after the original press releases that Eater and everyone just kind of snapped up to report. Interestingly enough, it got a rebuttal that not a ton of them reported from Chicago Magazine from the only investor in the restaurant, Mike Olszewski. He put forward $3 million in total to Grace. I think it was 1 point something million right away, and then he continued to invest along the way. But this was back in 2012, right? And since that investment, Grace this is quoting now, quote, Grace did well. It was profitable 8 months after opening, and he has recouped his entire investment. This year, Duffy and Muser were scheduled to participate in revenue sharing with Olszewski, with profits divided evenly amongst the three. Olszewski says the pair would have been earning substantially more than each of their $160,000 annual salaries. Through a spokeswoman, Duffy and Muser declined to be interviewed. Their employment contracts spanned an initial 10 years, and they were renewable every year after that, with any party allowing an exit by giving a written notice at least 30 days prior to the end of the term, end quote. So they were committed. They were committed for 10 years. I think it was $60,000 or $80,000 a year. Don't quote me on it, for the initial X amount of time. Once he got his money back, they increased their salaries to $160,000 a year plus an equal split on profits after that, which is crazy. That, like, I can only imagine getting paid that much as a chef. But the problem that comes now is that they broke the contract. It has not been 10 years since Grace opened, and because they didn't give written notice even at all, they just kind of left and maybe or maybe not got fired. That results in them, Curtis and Michael, not being able to either open or invest or participate in restaurants in Chicago or any of the counties surrounding Chicago for 18 months. So this will be interesting to see what happens in this kind of limbo time period for the two of them. But that was the point where a lot of people either got pissed off or went one direction or the other. This breach of contract, and more importantly, that this was in the contract, that they couldn't just get up and leave and then open another place down the street and, you know, take all of that with them. So Olszewski also saying, quote, my sole purpose was to be the armchair investor, but after getting everything going, I saw this wasn't going to be the case. When we first opened, some things were just catastrophic. The build-out took a year and a half. It should have taken 6 to 8 months. I negotiated for all of our food prices from the beginning. Most restaurants fail. A lot of them do. I had to take an active role or Grace would not have operated at the financial level that it did, end quote. And as someone, this is interesting because when the whole not paying us overtime thing happened, I remember distinctly Curtis saying, I had no idea you guys were not getting paid. And that to me was also shocking as a young cook, because my whole thing was that the head chef should know exactly what's happening on the books at all times. And maybe that was my failure. If he had an investor who was going to be controlling the books, that's not his area. Well, that's not where he should be spending his time. But anyways, it's interesting to me to see all of this happening afterwards from an outsider's perspective now that I've matured a little bit. And as far as how quickly everything escalated, quote, the last 8 months, business was declining. Revenues were down 20, 25, 30%, but expenses were up 6 to 9%. It was Tuesday, December 19th. I wanted to talk to Curtis. He didn't show up for work. The next day, people weren't showing up for work. Curtis never spoke to me. He never gave me notice or anything. I found out he quit from the New York Times story, end quote. How do you think that makes me feel? Anyways, regardless, there's also some health department allegations, so you can see this entire scenario is just a mess, right? I don't want to use my not so great experience there as a reason to talk bad about anyone involved in this story, because truthfully, it sucks, right? Curtis's dream was Grace. He worked incredibly hard for it, and regardless of how it turned out, in my head, right, however I wanted it to be, is besides the point, right? It wasn't my restaurant, but as someone who had experience with them before opening, before 3 stars, through interviews and beers after work and service, like, I spent time with these people, right? Like, there's an incredible amount of ego at play, and that's something I can confidently say, right? The fact that they complained, there's literally an article that says they complained about not having enough creative freedom at Grace, right? Like, that's crazy. They said the same thing at Avenues when the hotel made them jump through hoops to buy new plates for service, right? Like, this dude built you a custom kitchen in your perfect space, and because revenues are down, maybe he isn't going to be that happy about you ordering weird, exotic, expensive ingredients or getting that new pottery for the beef course, right? Like, again, this is bigger than me. This is bigger than Curtis Duffy or Michael Muser. Forget about the silly drama and the allegations and the he said, she said stuff. Like, this industry is about relationships. And if you're going to get into bed with someone financially, you have to be willing to compromise on certain things. And if Grace is your dream and you have it, right? Like, you have this restaurant, why in the world are you complaining? Right? Like if you want to be 100% owner of the restaurant, negotiate it in a contract. Like maybe it takes 2 or 5 or 8 years. But if that's your dream, your one big professional goal in life, why in the world would you be dramatic about not being able to have it right now? To me, it's just a lack of patience. It's unrealistic expectations. It's the same ego-driven, empty promises that I dealt with when I was part of the team. And I want you to be aware of this kind of stuff, good or bad, that I cover on the show, so you can protect yourself, so you can be smart in situations where people want your skills or your name or whatever you bring to the table. I'm going through it right now, right? Like someone wants to hire me to run a portion of their business, and I'm not going to start until I get a ton of stuff in writing. And it's not being nitpicky, it's just being smart, right? Like one line in a contract could have saved this entire situation. If Curtis and Michael really wanted to buy Grace from the get-go, they were either too short-sighted to put it in the contract, or they're scumbags for thinking they could gain enough leverage to swindle their one investor out of the business. Like, these stories, as you pay attention in your career, are the ones that will bring you the most value down the road, right? Like, they might even save you hundreds of thousands of dollars. So good on you for listening to this show and paying attention to my rants. Does anybody have any questions? We're live right now. There's a few of you listening. I want to pose any questions. I will get back to them as the show comes to a close, but that was a lot, and that was super heavy. I do want to transition into something completely ridiculous to take the burden, to take the weight off of everyone's shoulders, shake it out. A pizzeria in Brooklyn called Vinny's Pizzeria has created Tide Pods pizza. It's actually called Pied Pods, but with the current madness that's happening on the internet with people eating Tide Pods on camera for views and getting sick and being stupid, yes, this is an actual thing if you're not familiar. I just think it's such a smart play on pop culture for these pizza guys. Whether or not the blue and orange dyed mozzarella on the bites is actually tasty or not, I give people, I say give people their blue and orange edible food, not the kind that you have to call the Poison Control Center about. Next up, the 24-year-old food publication Saveur is going through a bit of a transition. 70 of their employees were laid off. The editor-in-chief, Adam Sachs' tenure with them is also over. Again, with stories like Lucky Peach closing down, this is a little bit more of a mean soul speaking out on Twitter. Sad that it's happening. However, the transition means that they're now a quarterly publication, with our goals being to, quote, keep up our original digital content, end quote, which is for their website as well as for Facebook. I checked. They're not the best videos. There's no characters that get involved. It's kind of the cliche Facebook video that you would expect to see someone cooking with a little bit of text over the video. That is their original online content. But it's just a change with the times, right? Like, I know way more about Bon Appetit's videos because they invest more. Their production quality is better. They have the same hosts on over and over again. I've seen Food 52 on Instagram. I know it's a Food 52 photo. Just a ton of people refusing to adapt and evolve. It's not that surprising for me to see stuff like this happen. Unfortunately, it sucks, but Food and Wine is downsizing. Like, how many of you are actually pumped to read the next issue of Saveur, right? Like, none of us. And that's going to be the end of this story. The internet is where it's at. If you don't change, you're going to die. That's just how it is. Next up, a fantastic story that I was super excited to hear about. Justin Timberlake had Noma cater his album release party. Yes, the album is called Man of the Woods, and it is now making sense in your head because they served bites like black garlic, rose oil, and ants, sea urchin and kelp pie, Abel skeever and grasshopper, and pork cracklin, chocolate, and dried berries. So it all happened in New York City, where Noma did a pop-up back in September. If you guys don't remember, that cost $2,000 a head. Craziness. But this is just an example of being super niche and being hired to do what you do best. And when that happens, you can charge whatever you want. And I'm sure it was not cheap for this event to happen. But it's Justin Timberlake, so it's fine. Next up, super unfortunate news. I was on a plane from Paris when it happened, and I landed back in the US to find out that Paul Bocuse had died at age 91. He died in his restaurant in Lyon. I want to spare the people that already read the articles and know the stories, but I do want to share a story of my own. In culinary school, on the first day when I was at the Culinary Institute of America. They gathered up all of us new kids into an auditorium, and the president of the school came out. We were all just super nervous sitting in our chef whites, or I think we were in dress clothes. And he gave a talk about ambition and working hard. And he posed the question, who knows who Chef Paul Bocuse is? And of the 85 of us in the room, maybe 5 of us raised their hand. And I was not one of them. I did not know who Paul Bocuse was. I knew the modern chefs. I knew Grant Achatz and Thomas Keller and Ferran Adria, but you go back in the lineage, and Paul Bocuse is really the granddaddy of all of them, right? Like if you're like I was and you don't know who Paul Bocuse is, I linked up a fantastic piece, the best article I've seen of him passing away. New York Times did an amazing piece that does a great breakdown of his classic dishes, his impact on the industry, and his legacy that will ultimately outlive him. So I hope he rests in peace, and I wish the best for his family and friends. I will end this story with a particularly inspiring quote that I'm living by right now from him on media and self-promotion that goes, quote, "You've got to beat the drum in life. God is already famous, but that doesn't stop the preacher from ringing the church bells every morning," end quote. Next up, a super smart move by David Chang, and more importantly on Netflix for getting more original food content going and picking good people for their shows. He's got a new show coming to the platform called Ugly Delicious. The goal being, quote, Ugly Delicious will cover myriad cuisines with input from food fanatics like Alan Yang, Ruth Reichel, Peter Meehan, Jessica Koslow, Justin Yu, Ali Wong, Renee Redzepi, Jimmy Kimmel, Roy Choi, and Eater's own Serena Dai. Chang says the goal was to create a collaborative forum, a place where it's okay to have strong opinions and honest conversations about food, end quote. It premieres on February 23rd. There's a little trailer segment from Ali Wong that seems it's refreshing. It's real, it's authentic. They're like at a restaurant and they complain that the place is a little bit too bright and peppy. They want the places that are kind of a little bit more grungy. They talk about Yelp a little bit. It's an interesting piece. I'm excited to see the conversations that happen with a show like that, especially because Netflix's current food shows are the kind of dramatic and pompous cinematography type shows like Chef's Table or Michael Pollan's Cooked. I'm excited to watch this show. Will you be watching? I'd be interested to know if you guys are pumped about a show like this or not. Let me know in the comments. Also, a quick little tack on, there are now photos from Major Domo, which is Chang's first restaurant in LA, complete with like 30 pictures of the dining room. It's a little weird to see, but that's all linked up in the article down below. I just want to continue giving you guys updates on this story as it transpires. It's going to be interesting to see how this space does. It's a huge space. It seems pretty basic, nothing super special about the interior. I'm sure there's stories about everything that goes into it, but I just don't think that it has the same character as the like OG Momofuku spots in New York City. But it's meant to be a spot that says, quote, truly takes a unique approach to Los Angeles cuisine, end quote. So we'll see what happens. I just want to keep you guys in the loop. Next up, Flynn McGarry is in the news, which I have to preface, I'm a huge fan of that guy. No joke. I'm not sure if that's a popular opinion or not. It seems like now that he's not 11 anymore, people are actually respecting him. He's 19 now and is supposedly opening an all-day restaurant in New York City. And it's going to start with pastries during the day, starting at 8 a.m., and small plates for dinner up until midnight. And I personally love the idea. We've covered the fact that he's, quote, so done with pop-ups. And again, all of this is speculation. There hasn't been an official announcement from Flynn. Eater apparently did some digging that his sister Paris applied for a liquor license on the space, and they've actually seen Flynn inside the old Cafe Henri space in New York City. So this is just an example of someone going back to basics. He's done with the quote-unquote fine dining side of things. He wants to cook more, running a profitable business, taking advantage, full advantage of the space that you have. That's coming from not just serving dinner tasting menus stuff, and going into stuff like serving pastries in the morning. If you're passionate about it and it brings people in and it brings you more revenue, I'm all about it. It's smart, but the thing that caught my eye about the article was that it's going to be open 7 days a week. Not only is it an all-day restaurant, but it's an all-the-time restaurant. So If you're 19 and you got it like that, good on you, Flynn. I just don't want this to be a recipe for burnout for the young chef. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, how he juggles that. I know he has been big on traveling the last few months, so we'll see how that also factors into it. Because if you do have an all-day space and you want to be cooking all the time, it's good to say that on paper, but after 8 months of doing that, how exactly do you feel? And do you delegate? Do you remove yourself? Are you only there for dinner? Like, how does this all transpire? It's going to be interesting and a story that I'm going to be paying attention to going forward. But even taking it a step back, there's a documentary about him coming out tomorrow at Sundance, which should be super interesting. Another piece of content that I'm super interested to watch whenever that comes out and where that comes out. We'll see. Next up, I sincerely hope you're subscribed to me on YouTube. I gave an update to the Patreon squad earlier this morning. There's a ton of videos planned for me this week. This is actually a double upload day. I'm scheduled to have videos every single day this week. I have this place called Royster, which is a restaurant that I went to in Chicago, Grand Rapids' casual spot. That episode's coming out later today. So I hope you guys are just excited as I am. There's a new video all about my chef knife sharpening gear that just dropped yesterday. I've got, again, 4 this place called episodes dropping this week. In addition to Royster, there's David Tutin in Paris, Osteria Francescana, and Solare here in Seattle. Those are all dropping this week. I'm stoked for that. I have a ton of video editing to do, but that's a little humble brag, a little shameless plug. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or following on Twitter and on Instagram. It's going to be a good week from content for me. So last up, our non-industry story. Hubert, my best friend and guest on the podcast from last week, gifted me a Nintendo Switch for my birthday/Christmas. And I've been playing Zelda Breath of the Wild, and guys, it's freaking dope. I haven't had so much fun playing a video game in a while, and I took a look at a tutorial on YouTube for this part that I was having trouble with and saw how much more I have to play in the game. It just got me super excited, right? Like, I've been playing video games since as long as I can remember. Ever since I moved to Europe, I stopped just to focus a little bit more on work, but I'm finding it's incredibly therapeutic for me. And it also stimulates my creativity quite a bit. I get a ton of ideas and interesting insights as I'm playing. And I love single player kind of open world problem solving games, and Zelda is just great for that. It is just fun. It's not competitive with anyone else or multiplayer online. Plus, the Switch is just an incredible piece of tech. I can play it on my TV. It can be in my hands. It's just the best. I'm having a ton of fun with it. So are any of you guys playing Nintendo Switch? Me and Anna are also having a great time with Mario Kart 8. It is a really fun way for us to spend time together that is not eating or falling asleep watching movies, which is what we do 80% of the time. So with that, this has been episode 48 of The Emulsion. Thank you so much for listening. Just a quick little reminder before you take off. If you want to support this or any of the other content I do for as little as $1 per month, that is like less than a pair of socks, I would love for you to check out my page on Patreon. That is patreon.com/Justin Khanna. If you can't swing the Patreon right now, but you still want to support what I do, I am in the process of building my email list. Go ahead and check out my website, justinkhanna.com. Click on the newsletter button, and we will get you all set up with that. If you have stories you want covered on next week's show, that will actually be next week again. If you have questions for Dawsby, that's going to happen this weekend. Shoot them to me on Twitter and hashtag the Emulsion so I can find them. Subscribe if you aren't already. Definitely leave a thumbs up on this video or consider leaving a review on iTunes if you listen there. Regardless of where you are, I appreciate your ears. So thank you, thank you, thank you so much. My name's Justin Khanna. Have a good one. What's up, YouTube fam? Let's see what you guys said in the comments. The Lost Kitchen Cookbook. Will you send me a link to that, either on Instagram or on Twitter? If you like it, I would love to read it. You're in class right now. You're cooking. Where are you guys cooking at? I want to know. I want to know. I want to know. Greetings from London. How do you choose places to stage? It should either be for the experience, for you to either, like for me, for example, I really wanted to do my externship at Alinea. That was my big thing in school. So I knew that they weren't going to hire me based just on the fact that I was interested. I needed something else to back it up. So I started by doing stages at other restaurants in New York City so that when I did go to Alinea, I could be like, hey, look at what I did. So that's one, either to build up for a bigger stage, or if it's a place that you're just sincerely interested in the food, or you want a job there, or you want to learn exactly what they do, right? Like if you're really interested in cooking over open fire, I would be interested in finding the best place to cook, like to learn about that. Who is the best person in the world at cooking over fire? And find that person, whether that's Cezanne in San Francisco or Echibari in Spain. Like, you need to find exactly what you want to learn and go learn that from those people. Ask a ton of questions. Become friends with the people who are actually doing that. Like, if you're going to go to Fäviken and learn about Swedish cooking, you should become friends not with Magnus Nielsen because he doesn't have time to teach you stuff, but become friends with the line cook who's cooking the king crab dish, right? Like, it's about relationships and about that kind of stuff. So in London, I don't know. I'm sure you have something in your brain, something that you're interested in doing. I don't need to answer that for you. But anyways, what do I think about the movie Burnt? It was a Hollywoodized view at what it's like to cook in a Michelin-starred kitchen. Not all of it's wrong. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that actually happens that's real. But I mean, it's Hollywoodized. It's like any other. I mean, like Wolf of Wall Street. Was Wolf of Wall Street actually like that? No, but I mean, it's not wrong. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that actually happened in that movie. But they have to make it entertaining for Hollywood, for the people like us who don't work on Wall Street, who still need to get some entertainment from the movie. Hopefully that answers that question. I'm going to CIA next year. Do you think an extern should be at a place that will give me a better name on my resume but less experience, or less of a name but more better experience? Awesome question. Actually, a really intelligent question. Up until I moved to Norway, I had so many stars on my resume, it was stupid. But the problem was I didn't actually know how to cook that well. And that was really crushing for me, right? Like I knew how to plate, I knew how to do all of these recipes. But if you put me on a line, if you put me on like a brunch line to make eggs Benedict, I would go down like a stack of potatoes. And that really sucked. But for me, the names are so valuable because they will get you to your next thing, right? So you have to. Grant Achatz has this great thing, and I have it written down somewhere. I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to find it, but it's you work somewhere either for one of three things: the experience, the thing on your resume, or the money. And you have to decide which one that thing, that place is going to be for you. Is it going to be, there's a lot of, like, when I was at Noma, for the 2 weeks that I spent at Noma, there was so many people there who were from Turkey or India or Indonesia who literally were there so that they could go back to this country or this place where they were and use that name on their resume to get investors, to get people to pay attention to them. Because knowing that you were able to work at a place like that, people don't know how well you cook. And also, it depends on where you are in your career, like, right? Like I wanted to go to the French Laundry so bad because I wanted to be the best cook. I wanted to, I still want to be the best cook. It's still like this thing that's in me that I want to be a better cook than all of you. I want to crush all of you on the line. And it's this competitive thing in me. And so you need to have a balance of both. My short answer is you need to have a balance of both. I spent the big part of the initial part of my career going for names, only names, resume building, resume building, resume building, all the stars, all the names on my resume. So when I took that piece of paper that had my work experience on it and slid it across the table, the person would be like, whoa, we gotta hire this guy. Then the only problem with doing that is you need to have the skills to back it up. If you don't, it's really embarrassing. And that's what happened to me in Norway. It was like, this guy worked at Per Se, but he can't glaze vegetables, right? Like, that was really, really crushing. But I learned, and I learned really fast, and now I can cook anyone under the table. At least in my head I can. But anyways, that's my short answer. I'm getting my first job at a restaurant. What should be my position or job in the kitchen? Start at the bottom, dude. Like, learn. You get empathy for all those people around you. If you're really interested in spending a lot of time at that restaurant, it's important for you to know all of the positions so you can empathize with everyone. Like, if you don't know what it's like to be on salad station and you just start on meat station, it's going to be really hard if you get promoted to sous chef then and you have to manage the salad guy because you have no idea what it's like to be on that station. So that empathy part is really important. And if you're playing the long game, it's important to kind of make sure that you work as many stations as possible, even if that is starting at the bottom. At per se, everybody starts as a commis. Even if you were a sous chef at a 3-star in Paris, you start as a commis so you can know from the bottom up how the restaurant works. Do I think that high volume kitchens for long periods of time are essential in the long run as a chef? No. You need to know how to do it, but it's not critical. It is not essential. I mean, if your goal is to have a high volume kitchen, yes, like you need that experience. But as much as I loved cooking the 9-course tasting menu in Norway, we also had 120-person 3-course parties upstairs where we had to do. So it's very, very important that you're able to do both. If that's going to be part of your job, right? Like, does Flynn McGarry need to do high volume kitchen stuff for his little tiny spot in New York City? Probably not, because that's not his ambition. So the idea that you have to be this chef that's experienced in all things is ludicrous and it's silly. So don't get too caught up on the fact that you need to be a good sushi chef and a good breakfast cook and a good fine dining person. Do what makes you happy. Do what excites you, and do what maps with your ambitions, and that will take you much further than the idea that you have to whatever. Any more questions? I kind of like this after show Q&A that we have for those of you that stick around until the end of the show. I'm always happy. See you, Jack. Great hanging out. Crush it in class. Excited for you guys. Yeah, if there's no other questions, I'm going to head off. I have a bunch more video editing to do today, like I said. I'm excited for you guys to see what's coming. There's a lot of extra stuff, amazing stuff coming. I did pick up a knife while I was in Chicago that I loved. Only to support Town Cutler, but there's going to be a review on that. Excited to tell you guys about that. Thoughts on CIA? Amazing for opening doors. You should be making friends with all of your professors. You should be emailing every single restaurant you can and saying, I go to CIA, can I come hang out with you for a day? Because that's, like, seriously, like, that is the easiest foot in the door ever. Because everyone is willing to help out a student. While you're a student, everyone is willing to help you out. Like, say, like, literally every single, like, if you want access to a chef, if you want access to Daniel Hume, right, 11 Madison Park, New York City, pick a paper that your instructor is having you write and make it about him. I don't even care if it's about, like, sustainable food systems. Figure out what 11 Madison Park is doing about sustainable food and ask to interview Daniel Hume. That interview with him will make so much more impact when you slide your resume across the table to him. And it's just, like, I wish that I did more of that kind of, like, guerrilla networking when I was in CIA, only because it has such prestige and because you're connected so hard with all these restaurants in New York City. You're 90 minutes away from New York City. And for the people who don't take advantage of that, it just, like, it pained me. I'm so happy that I staged every single weekend that I was in CIA, but that's just me. As far as the education goes, I learned the basics. I learned what it's like to work with other people. Do I use anything that I did? I learned a lot more at the Michelin kitchens that I worked in. Only because, again, that mapped to my ambition. CIA has an incredible program if you're interested in being a hotel chef. But I digress. Do I have a favorite knife brand / maker? I really like the stuff that Isaiah Schrader is doing out of Wisconsin. That's the guy who made the chopsticks that I did in my chopstick review. His knives are amazingly beautiful. But my favorite knife brand that you can just buy, like, off the shelf is probably Ninohi, out of Japan. At a couple different retailers, but again, Korin, the brand that I talk about quite a bit, has their stuff. The quality of the handle, the way that it feels, the weight, the steel is incredibly good. Um, Even the little details, like they take the, where's the knife? Boop. They take the backside and they like polish it down so it's comfortable while you're holding it. Amazing, amazing, amazing stuff. So that's my favorite knife brand maker, at least at the moment. Town Cutler as well. They make incredible knives. But that's just brands that I like and that I enjoy and that I like supporting. Okay, guys, great hanging out. We're at 45 minutes. That was long-ish. Thanks again for watching. If you have any questions you want me to cover next week, or stories, or questions for Dozfee, I still have that offer open that I've emailed a few of you about with custom sayas for your knives. I don't have one on me. It's back in the toolbox, but he is happy to do free art for you guys on your wooden knife saya covers if you're interested. All you have to do is cover shipping to Seattle and back, and that's it. So if you guys are interested in doing that, go ahead and hit me up on any social media, and I would be interested in hooking you guys up with that. It's completely free. You just got to pay for shipping for your sayas to and from, and we'll get you tricked out. But anyways, that's it. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.